Alina had always known warmth and love. Her father, Lord Raymond, was a man of honour and kindness, raising her with all the affection a daughter could ever wish for. Their home, a grand estate surrounded by lush gardens and golden fields, was filled with laughter and peace. Though her mother had passed away when she was just a child, her father had made sure she never felt alone. Servants adored her, the townspeople respected her, and her days were filled with learning, adventure, and the quiet security of a loving home. But change had a way of creeping in like an unseen storm. When she turned 16, her father announced his decision to remarry. Lady Eleanor arrived in their home soon after, graceful, beautiful, and possessing a charm that could melt even the coldest hearts. To all who saw her, she was the perfect noblewoman, the kind of woman who could bring balance and companionship to Lord Raymond's life. Alina had tried to welcome her, despite the uneasy feeling that settled in her chest every time Lady Eleanor's sharp eyes met hers. There was something calculated in the way she spoke, in the way her smile never quite reached her eyes. Still, Alina told herself she was imagining things. Her father was happy, and that should have been enough. For a while, everything seemed normal. Lady Eleanor played the part of the doting wife and new mother well, always praising Alina in public, showing affection in front of Lord Raymond, and speaking softly whenever he was near. But behind closed doors, subtle shifts began. It was in the way she would dismiss Alina's words with a patronizing smile, how she took control of the household without ever seeking her father's opinion, and how her cold fingers would brush against Alina's shoulder, just a little too forcefully, when no one was looking. Small things changed first. Her favourite books missing from the library, her requests being ignored by the servants who once adored her, invitations to noble gatherings suddenly excluding her name. Alina started feeling like a stranger in her own home, her once bright world slowly dimming under the shadow of Lady Eleanor's presence. Then her father became distant. It was not immediate, nor obvious, but it was there. The way he started believing Eleanor's words over hers, how he no longer laughed with her as he once did, how he seemed weary whenever Alina tried to confide in him. Lady Eleanor had woven herself into his heart like poison, subtle but lethal. Alina watched in silence as the foundation of her life began to crack. She wanted to believe her father would see through the illusion, that he would realize what was happening before it was too late. But deep inside, she knew Lady Eleanor had not come into their lives to be a mother or a wife. She had come to take control. And Alina had no idea just how far her stepmother would go to make sure nothing stood in her way. The days of warmth between Alina and her father had not yet completely faded, and she clung to those moments whenever they came. Lord Raymond still had moments of tenderness for his daughter, soft smiles at breakfast, asking about her reading, walking with her through the gardens as he always had. In those brief instances, she could almost pretend nothing had changed. But the distance was growing. Lady Eleanor's influence was creeping in, like a slow-moving shadow, altering the way her father saw things, saw her. It began with small, almost unnoticeable things. Alina would walk into a room to find her stepmother whispering in her father's ear, only for their conversation to abruptly stop when she entered. The servants, once eager to serve her, now hesitated, glancing toward Lady Eleanor before fulfilling even the simplest of her requests. "Alina, my dear," Lady Eleanor would say with a smile so sweet it sent a chill down her spine. "I've noticed you spend so much time reading. Perhaps you should focus on more practical things, learning to manage a household, for instance. A noblewoman must know her duties." Lord Raymond had agreed. "She has a point, my love. You are of marrying age now. You should start thinking about your future." Alina had been stunned. Her father had always encouraged her to learn, to grow beyond the expectations placed upon noble daughters. But now, his words mirrored Eleanor's. Then came the subtle lies. "I fear Alina is struggling to adjust," Eleanor would say softly, when Lord Raymond asked why Alina seemed withdrawn. She is young, of course, but I worry she does not respect me as she should. Lord Raymond, weary from his responsibilities, sighed. She only needs time, of course. I only wish for harmony in this family. I would never want to replace her dear mother. Day by day, Alina felt her father slipping away. She tried to tell him, tried to make him see. But Eleanor had already planted the seeds of doubt. Every time Alina protested, it only confirmed what her stepmother had suggested, that she was being difficult, ungrateful, unable to accept change. And worst of all, her father believed it. At first, Lady Eleanor had worn her mask well. She had played the role of the devoted wife and caring stepmother with practiced ease, ensuring that every glance from Lord Raymond saw only her warmth and patience. But once she was sure of her place, once she had carefully woven herself into the fabric of the household, the mask began to slip. It started with small slights, things Alina might have ignored had she not already sensed the malice beneath Eleanor's perfect smile. A dress that had been promised to her suddenly given to one of Eleanor's distant nieces. A family dinner where her seat, once beside her father, was placed further away. A household matter discussed and decided without her knowledge. When she asked about it, Eleanor only smiled. "Oh dear, you must have misunderstood. I didn't think it was necessary to trouble you with such things." Alina saw the truth in the servants' eyes, though they dared not speak it aloud. They were afraid. Eleanor was in control now. Her father, too, had changed. When she spoke, he listened less. When she expressed frustration, he sighed instead of offering comfort. "Eleanor is trying her best, Alina," he would say. "I don't understand why you make things so difficult." The words stung. She had never made things difficult. She had only tried to hold on to the life that was slipping through her fingers. The cruelty grew bolder. When guests visited, Eleanor would laugh and say, "Alina has always been a little willful, but I do my best to guide her." When Alina protested, her father would look at her with disappointment, as if she were proving Eleanor's point. One evening, as she walked past the parlour, she overheard them talking. "I worry about her, my love," Eleanor murmured. "She is not as obedient as she should be. Perhaps we have spoiled her." Lord Raymond sighed. "She is young. She will learn." Eleanor's voice dropped lower. "If she does not, we may have to be firmer." A chill ran through Alina's spine. This was no longer just about control. Eleanor wanted her gone, and worse, her father was beginning to believe that perhaps she should be. Alina woke one morning to find that the world she had known was no longer hers. Lady Eleanor had taken full control of the household, and the transformation was swift and merciless. The servants who had once answered to Alina now turned away from her, their gazes lowered in silent obedience to their new mistress. Orders were no longer given to her, only demands. "You should learn the value of hard work," Eleanor said one day, handing Alina a list of chores. "It will build character." The tasks were demeaning: scrubbing floors, polishing silverware, mending torn linens. Things a noble daughter should never have been asked to do. But when she protested, her father's response cut deeper than any of Eleanor's schemes. "Perhaps this will teach you humility," he said with tired eyes. "You have been acting spoiled lately, Alina." The words left her breathless. Had he truly been so blinded? She had no choice but to obey. Days passed in a blur of endless labor. Her once soft hands became calloused, her fine dresses replaced with plain, worn garments. Meals became smaller, and the warm place at the family table was no longer hers. She was given a small seat in the corner, treated like nothing more than a servant in her own home. Yet, she refused to break. Each time Eleanor passed by, looking for signs of defeat, Alina lifted her chin higher. She would not crumble beneath this cruelty. She would not give her stepmother the satisfaction of seeing her fall apart. In the solitude of her room, she allowed herself to grieve. But outside, she was steel. If they wanted to push her into the shadows, she would learn to stand in the darkness. If they wanted her to believe she was powerless, she would find a way to reclaim her strength. She would endure, and one day she would rise again. The breaking point came faster than Alina had expected. Lady Eleanor had grown bolder, no longer bothering to hide her disdain. But Alina had endured. She had refused to bow, refused to beg. And that had only made Eleanor more determined to see her gone. One evening, as Alina returned from the endless chores assigned to her, she found the entire household gathered in the grand hall. Her father stood at the centre, his face unreadable, while Eleanor stood beside him, her expression carefully crafted into one of sorrow. A guard held out a small velvet pouch. When he opened it, gold coins spilled onto the floor. "She was stealing from you, my love," Eleanor whispered, just loud enough for the watching servants to hear. "I caught her myself. I never wanted to believe it, but I could not ignore it any longer." Alina's heart pounded. "That's a lie," she said, her voice sharp with anger. "I would never. Enough." Her father's voice was quiet but firm. When she looked into his eyes, she saw doubt, exhaustion, and something worse, acceptance. She turned to him in desperation. "Father, you know me. You raised me. Do you truly believe I would steal from you?" Eleanor stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on Lord Raymond's arm, a picture of sorrowful grace. "We have tried, haven't we? We have been patient. We have given her chances." She sighed. "Perhaps we failed her." Alina saw the moment her father gave in. He turned away. "I cannot allow a thief in my home," he said, his voice hollow. The words struck harder than any blow. A guard took her by the arm, leading her toward the entrance. She struggled, panic setting in. "Father, please," she begged. "You are making a mistake." But he did not look at her. The doors opened and the night swallowed her whole. Cold wind bit at her skin, and the realization settled like stone in her chest. She had lost everything: her home, her name, her father. Alone, abandoned, and with nowhere to go, only one thought remained. She would survive, not for them, not for revenge, but because she refused to let this be the end of her story. The night was merciless. The cold bit through Alina's thin dress, the wind howling like a beast hungry for prey. She had never truly felt hunger before, not the way she did now, an emptiness gnawing at her stomach, making her limbs weak. She walked for hours, her bare feet aching against the rough, frozen ground. She had no destination, no plan. By morning, she found herself in the heart of the city, a place she had only ever visited with her father in the safety of a carriage. Now, she was just another face in the crowd, a girl with nothing to her name. She soon learned that survival was not easy. The baker turned her away when she begged for food. The innkeeper scoffed when she asked for shelter. The noble name she once carried meant nothing here. Days passed in a blur of hunger and exhaustion. She slept in alleys, curled beneath tattered cloth, her once delicate hands growing rough as she scavenged for scraps. The streets were cruel, and those who lurked in the shadows saw her as easy prey. One evening, as she wandered the market, a rough hand grabbed her wrist. "Pretty thing like you shouldn't be alone," a man sneered. Fear shot through her, but before she could react, another figure intervened, a woman, tall and commanding, stepping between Alina and her attacker. "Let go," she said, her voice sharp as a blade. The man hesitated, then slinked away into the crowd. Alina looked up at her savior, a woman dressed in worn but sturdy clothing, eyes sharp with experience. "You don't belong out here," the woman said. Alina swallowed hard. "I have nowhere else to go." The woman studied her for a long moment before nodding. "Then you'll have to learn how to survive." That night, Alina followed her to a small but warm home tucked away from the city's dangers. The woman's name was Leora, and she had once been like Alina, cast out, forced to fight for her place in the world, and under her guidance, Alina would learn. Because survival was no longer enough, she would find a way to rise. The first lesson Alina learned was that survival was not just about endurance, it was about strength. Leora wasted no time. "If you want to live, you must learn," she had said. And so, Alina did. She learned to work with her hands, to stitch torn fabric and mend broken things. She learned to move unnoticed, to listen when others spoke, to understand the city's hidden language, the way people bartered, how deals were made, how to spot deception in a single glance. But most importantly, she learned how to fight. "You've spent your life in comfort," Leora had observed one evening, handing her a wooden staff. "You relied on others to protect you. That ends now." At first, Alina was clumsy. Her arms ached from swinging the staff, her feet stumbled over the uneven ground, but every time she fell, she got up. Every time Leora knocked the weapon from her hands, she picked it up again. The frustration burned in her veins, but so did something else: determination. Her stepmother had wanted her broken, had expected her to wither away like a forgotten flower. But Alina refused. Days turned to weeks, and she grew stronger. The ache in her muscles became familiar. The hunger in her belly no longer a weakness, but a drive to push forward. She worked for coin, small jobs that kept her moving, sweeping floors, carrying goods, learning the ways of the city's workers. She was no longer the girl who had once lived in luxury. And yet, she never forgot who she was. She still dreamed of the home she had lost, of her father's voice before it had turned cold. But now, those memories did not weigh her down. They fueled her. One evening, as she sat by the fire, Leora watched her with a knowing smile. "You're not the same girl I found in the streets," she said. Alina met her gaze. Number him not, she had lost everything. But in losing herself, she had found something far greater: her own strength. And one day, she would use it to reclaim what was hers. Alina no longer saw herself as a fallen noble. She was something else now, someone stronger, someone with purpose. For too long, she had let others decide her fate. First, her father's love had defined her. Then, Alina's cruelty had tried to erase her. But neither of them held power over her anymore. She would carve her own path, not for revenge, not to reclaim what was stolen, but to prove to herself that she was more than what they had made her. She started small. With the skills she had learned from Leora, she found work beyond simple labor. She had always been sharp, always observant. Now she used it to her advantage. She noticed how merchants negotiated, how traders measured the worth of goods, how the right words could turn a deal in one's favor. And so, she began. She started by running errands for traders, carrying messages, gathering information. Her ability to remember details, to analyze people's needs, made her valuable. Soon she moved on to brokering small deals, using her quick mind and steady voice to help others negotiate fair trades. People began to notice her. At first, they saw only a girl with no title, no wealth, no connections. But as time passed, they saw something more. A mind sharper than a blade, a will unshaken by hardship. The merchants started trusting her advice. Business owners sought her out for guidance. "She's clever," they whispered. "She knows how to turn nothing into something." Her name began to spread, not as Lord Raymond's daughter, not as the girl cast out by her own family, but as Alina, the girl who built herself from the ground up. One evening, Leora watched her counting the coin she had earned that day. "You're making a name for yourself," she said. "What will you do with it?" Alina looked at the small fortune she had gathered. Not much, but enough to keep going, enough to take her further. She met Leora's gaze, her heart steady. "I'm not done yet," because this was just the beginning. She had no desire to return to her past, no need to beg for what had been lost. She would build something greater, something truly hers. Lady Eleanor had spent years weaving her web, carefully crafting the perfect image of a devoted wife and noble woman. But lies, no matter how expertly spun, always unraveled in the end. It started as whispers. A merchant, Alina, had once helped mention her name in passing, praising her sharp mind and business acumen. Another trader confirmed the story, adding, "She's clever, that one. Could run an empire if she wanted to." The noble circles took notice. "Isn't she Lord Raymond's daughter?" someone asked. Didn't they say she was troublesome? But if she was such a disgrace, how did she manage to build herself up from nothing? The questions planted doubt, and doubt, like a single crack in glass, could shatter everything. Alina, once confident in her place, began to feel the walls closing in. The merchants she once dealt with started hesitating. Invitations to gatherings became fewer. The noblewomen who had once whispered praises now whispered suspicions instead. Then came the worst blow. Lord Raymond himself began to notice. He had ignored the nagging feeling for so long, convinced that he had made the right choice, that Alina had betrayed him, that Eleanor had only ever been trying to help. But the rumors would not stop. Everywhere he turned, he heard his daughter's name spoken with admiration. She is thriving, one lord said over a game of chess. I met her recently. Remarkable girl. A shame what happened to her. Lord Raymond stiffened. What do you mean? The man gave him a knowing look. You cast out a daughter with a mind sharper than steel, and yet she still rises. Tell me, my friend, was it truly her fault? Or did someone else ensure her fall? For the first time in years, doubt truly took root in Lord Raymond's mind. Alina felt it too. She saw it in the way he looked at her now, not with unwavering trust, but with questions in his eyes. And she knew Alina was not gone. She was not broken. She was rising. And soon, she would cast a shadow large enough to swallow everything Alina had built. The moment Alina stepped into the grand hall of her former home, silence fell. The very walls seemed to hold their breath, as if recognizing the girl they had once watched suffer. Lady Eleanor sat poised at the head of the room, still draped in her finery, still wearing the mask of grace and power. But her eyes betrayed her. She hadn't expected this.
Alina had not returned as a beggar. She had not come to plead for scraps of mercy. She stood tall, dressed in fine but simple clothing, clothing she had earned, not inherited. Her presence alone sent a message. She had built herself up from nothing, and nothing could tear her down again. Eleanor recovered quickly, her lips curving into a well-practiced smile. Alina, she purred, standing as if greeting an old friend. What a surprise. I had wondered what became of you. Alina did not return the smile. Did you? She asked, tilting her head slightly. Or did you hope never to see me again? Eleanor's eyes narrowed for the briefest moment before she sighed, shaking her head in feigned disappointment. You always were so dramatic. I did what was best for you, dear. It was a lesson you needed to learn. Alina let out a quiet laugh. A lesson? She took a step closer, her voice steady, unwavering. You lied. You stole my home, turned my father against me, and left me to starve in the streets. But I survived. And now, here we are. A shadow flickered across Eleanor's face, but she masked it quickly. And look at you now, she said smoothly. You should be thanking me. If I hadn't pushed you, you wouldn't have become the woman standing before me today. Alina met her gaze, unflinching. You're right, she admitted. I did become stronger. But not because of you, in spite of you. Behind them, Lord Raymond watched in silence, his expression unreadable. But something in his eyes had changed. Doubt had turned to realization. He looked at Eleanor, then at Alina, and suddenly, all the years of deception unraveled before him. My God, he whispered. Eleanor turned to him quickly, desperation creeping into her voice. Darling, you know she... But for the first time, he didn't listen. For the first time, he saw the truth, and Eleanor knew. Her reign was crumbling. The fall of Lady Eleanor was swift and unforgiving. Rumours had already begun spreading, but now, with Lord Raymond's realization, the truth was undeniable. The noble circles that once welcomed her turned cold. Invitations ceased, business partners withdrew their support, and then came the final blow, an official inquiry into her deceit. Lord Raymond himself demanded an investigation. It didn't take long for the truth to surface. False accusations, missing funds, manipulation of household accounts. What she had done to Alina was only the beginning. The Council of Nobles convened, and Lady Eleanor was summoned before them. Her grace, her charm, none of it could save her now. The people who had once praised her whispered behind her back, their admiration replaced with disgust. "You will leave this house at once," Lord Raymond declared, his voice heavy with regret and anger. "You are no wife of mine." Eleanor, ever the survivor, straightened her back, lifting her chin. Even in disgrace, she refused to crumble. But as she was escorted away, she cast one last glance at Alina. Alina met her gaze without flinching. There was no hatred in her eyes, no need for revenge, only the quiet satisfaction of justice served. Later that evening, as the house settled into an uneasy silence, Lord Raymond approached his daughter. His once proud frame seemed smaller now, weighed down by guilt. "I was blind," he admitted, his voice raw. "I failed you." Alina studied him, the father she had once adored, the man who had so easily cast her aside. A part of her had once longed for this moment, to hear him admit his mistake, to beg for her forgiveness. But now that it had come, she felt no triumph. She had already made peace with the past. "I don't hate you," she said softly, "but I can't stay." His face crumbled, but he did not argue. He knew he had lost her long before this moment. Alina stepped forward, pressing a gentle hand to his arm. "Take care of yourself, father." And with that, she turned away, stepping into the life she had built for herself. Not as the daughter who had been cast out, but as the woman who had risen. Alina stood at the edge of the city, gazing at the horizon as the first light of dawn painted the sky in hues of gold and crimson. The wind carried the distant hum of life, the market vendors setting up their stalls, the blacksmith's hammer ringing against metal, the voices of a world she had once feared but now called her own. She had nothing when she was cast out. Now she had everything she had built with her own hands. Wealth? She had earned it through sharp wit and relentless determination. Power? She no longer needed a title to command respect. Her name alone carried weight in the world of trade and business. But more than that, she had something even greater: freedom. She was no longer defined by her past. She had no need to return to the home that had once rejected her. She had outgrown it, outgrown the girl who once sought validation from a father who hadn't seen her worth.
She turned to Leora, her mentor, her friend, the woman who had given her a second chance when the world had abandoned her. "What now?" Leora asked, watching her with quiet pride. Alina smiled, the kind that carried no bitterness, no regrets, just peace. "Now, I live." She had fought her battles. She had faced the woman who sought to destroy her and emerged victorious, not because she had sought revenge, but because she had refused to be broken. The hardships, the betrayals, the struggles, they had shaped her into the woman she was today, and for that, she held no resentment, only gratitude. As the sun rose higher, bathing the city in golden light, Alina took her first step forward, not toward a past she had long left behind, but toward a future of her own making. This was not the end of her story. This was only the beginning. Years passed, and Alina's name became known far beyond the city where her story began. She had built something greater than a mere fortune. She had built a legacy, a thriving trade empire, businesses that flourished under her guidance, and a reputation that commanded respect from the most powerful circles. But more than that, she had built a life of her own choosing, surrounded by people who valued her for who she was, not where she came from. As she walked through the bustling streets of the marketplace she once struggled to survive in, merchants greeted her warmly. She was no longer an outcast, no longer a forgotten daughter. She was Alina, strong, independent, and free. Word of Lady Eleanor's downfall had long since faded from the public eye, but Alina knew the truth. The once powerful woman now lived in quiet disgrace, abandoned by those who had once fawned over her. Without wealth, without influence, she was nothing more than a bitter shadow of her former self. But Alina did not linger on the past. She had no need for vengeance, no desire to see her stepmother suffer further. Eleanor had dug her own grave. Alina had risen above it all. As the sun cast its golden light over the city she had claimed as her own, she closed her eyes for a moment, breathing in the crisp air. She had survived. She had fought. And she had won, not by seeking revenge, but by proving that she was always meant for something greater. With one last glance at the city that had shaped her, she walked forward, leaving the past behind her once and for all. She had risen higher, and she would never fall again.